მოგესალმებით ყველას, ძალიან დიდი მადლობა მინდა გადაგიხადოთ მობრძანებისთვის. დღეს ჩვენ გვყავს ძალიან საპატიო სტუმარი ბრაიან ბრაუნი. მოგეხსენებათ 2016 წელს საქართველოში ჩატარდა მსოფლიო საოჯახო კონგრესი, რაც ჩვენთვის ძალიან დიდი პატივი იყო. ეს იყო მე-10 საიუბილეო კონგრესი და ძალიან გვიხარია, რომ ბრაიანი ზუსტად მაშინ საქართველოში აირჩიეს მსოფლიო საოჯახო კონგრესის პრეზიდენტად. ამას გარდა ბრაიანი არის არაერთი ტრადიციული ოჯახის დამცველი ორგანიზაციის დამფუძნებელი და გახლავთ ოჯახის საერთაშორისო ორგანიზაციის პრეზიდენტი, ცნობილი ამერიკელი საზოგადო მოღვაწე და ყველასთვის ძალიან სასურველი სტუმარი და ორატორი, როგორც ამერიკაში, ასევე მის ფარგლებს გარეთ და ძალიან გვიხარია, რომ დღეს მოგვეცა საშუალება ბრაიანმა ისაუბროს ისეთ საინტერესო თემაზე, როგორც არის თუ რა ხდება კონსერვატიზმის კუთხით ამერიკაში პრეზიდენტ ტრამპის ხანაში. თუმცა სანამ უშუალოდ ბრაიანი თავის საინტერესო ლექციას წაგვეკითხავს, მინდა რომ საქართველოს დემოგრაფიული საზოგადოება 21-ს თავმჯდომარეს ბატონ ლევან ვასაძეს ვთხოვო გააკეთოს თავის შესავალი სიტყვა, ვინაიდან ბრაიანი საქართველოში სწორედ მისი მოწვევით არის სტუმრად ჩამოსული. ბატონ ლევან, გთხოვთ.
დიდი მადლობა თიკო, დიდი სიყვარულით მოგილოცავთ წმინდა ნინოს დღეს და ნინოობას და შევთხოვთ წმინდა ნინოს, რომ მისი მადლი ფარავდეთ თქვენ ოჯახებს, ჩვენ სამშობლოს და საერთოდ ყველა ადამიანს. დღეს განსაკუთრებული დღე არის ჩვენთვის, იმიტომ რომ პირველ რიგში ჩვენ ვიწყებთ მორიგ საზოგადოებრივ ინიციატივას ან ფორმატს, რომელსაც ეწოდება ეროვნული მსჯელობის დარბაზი. ჩვენ ვიფიქრეთ, რა დაგვერქვია მისთვის უფრო, ასე ვთქვათ, ყურს შეჩვეული სახელი იქნებოდა სადისკუსიო კლუბი, მაგრამ გადაწყვიტეთ, რომ გვეცადა გამთავისუფლებულიყავით შეძლების და გვარად ეუფემიზმებისაგან და გადაწყვიტეთ დაგვერქმია მისთვის ასეთი სახელი. ეროვნული მსჯელობის დარბაზი იქნება წმინდა ექვთიმე ღვთისკაცის თაყაიშვილის სახელობის. შეიკრიბება აქ კიკეთში, ამ არაჩვეულებრივ დარბაზში, ამ არაჩვეულებრივ ბუნებაში რეგულარულად და გაერთიანებს იმ მეგობრებს, რომლებსაც ერთნაირი ეროვნული და ქრისტიანული მსოფლმხედველობა აქვთ და ზრუნვა ჩვენი ქვეყნის მომავალზე სურთ ამ მსოფლმხედველობიდან გამომდინარე. მას არ ექნება რაღაც ფორმალური ან მკაცრი ან ხისტი რეგულარული გრაფიკი, მაგრამ ჩვენ ვეცდებით, რომ შეძლების დაგვარად რეგულარულად მოვაწყოთ დარბაზის სხდომები, მოვიწვიოთ საინტერესო მომხსენებლები და ვიმსჯელოთ სხვადასხვა თემებზე, რომლებიც ამა თუ იმ ფორმით ეხება საქართველოს, იმიტომ რომ ჩვენ ყველაფერი გვაქვს, გვინდა და გვაწუხებს ჩვენი ქვეყნისათვის. ეროვნული მსჯელობის დარბაზის სახელწოდებიდან გამომდინარე ცხადია, რომ ჩვენ გსურს, რომ ეს იყოს ადგილი განსჯისათვის. მაგრამ განსჯაც არის და განსჯაც არსებობს ერთგვარი თუ გნებავთ ასეთი დაპირისპირების ფორმატის, გაუთავებელი ყაყანის და ერთმანეთის წეწვაგლეჯის ფორმატი, რომელშიც ჩვენი ქვეყანა არის ჩაფლული ბოლო მე-4 საუკუნის განმავლობაში და ჩვენ ხედავთ, რომ აი ამ რაღაც აღტკინებული ერთმანეთის შეურაცხყოფელი და დაპირისპირებული სულის პირობებში ძალიან ცოტა რამ იქმნება პოზიტიური, დადებითი, კონსტრუქტიული. ამიტომ ჩვენ არ გვსურს, იმიტომ კი არა, რომ ჩვენ საპირისპირო აზრის გვეშინია ან არა გვაქვს საშუალება გავცეთ მას პასუხი, ჩვენ უბრალოდ არ გვსურს კიდევ ერთი ასეთი საყაყანო, საჩხუბარი და ასე ვთქვათ, კონფლიქტური ფორუმის ან ადგილის დამატება ჩვენს ამ ისედაც გაგლეჯილი და ერთმანეთზე დაპირისპირებული საზოგადოების პირობებში მე მიმაცნია და ბევრ ჩვენს აქ მსხდომ მეგობარს მიაცნია რომ ჩვენ ძალიან გვაკლია სწორედ სიმშვიდე, ერთმანეთის სიყვარული, ერთმანეთის პატივისცემა და საღი აზრი და მოდით ჩადოთ ამ ფორმატშიც ვშვათ ის და გავაგრძელოთ ის ტრადიცია ქართული სულიერებისა, ქართული პატიოსნებისა, ერთმანეთის პატივისცემისა, რომელზეც იდგა საუკუნეების განმავლობაში ჩვენი კულტურა. ეს ეროვნული დარბაზი, ეროვნული მსჯელობის დარბაზი არის კიდევ ერთი ორგანული გაგრძელება ბევრი იმ სხვა ინიციატივებისა, რომლებსაც თქვენ ხედავთ ჩვენს მეგობრებთან ერთად. ეს არის დამატება, ვთქვათ, იმისა, რაც კეთდება მათ შორის კიკეთშიც, სკოლა იქნება ეს გოგებაშვილის სახელობის თუ ტაძრის 16 აყაიშვილის სახელობის ტაძრის მრევლად ყოფნა თუ ის საუბრები მეგობრებთან, რომლებიც გადაიცემა ინტერნეტში, თუ ეს ტელემიმართვები, რომლებიც გადაირჩება და მე იმედი მაქვს, რომ ეს ინიციატივაც რაღაცა კიდევ ერთი სუფთა ჰაერის და სიმშვიდის, ასე ვთქვათ, ოაზისი გახდება ბევრი ჩვენთაგანისათვის. ჩვენ არა გვაქვს რაღაც რეგლამენტირებული წევრობა, ან ვის დავპატიჟებთ, ვის არ დავპატიჟებთ, ჩვენ ტრადიციული საზოგადოება ვართ და მე მგონია რომ ეს ორგანულად და ბუნებრივად მოხდება, მეგობრები, ვინც ჩვენ გვიყვარს, ვისაც ჩვენ პატივს ვცემთ, ვისაც ჩვენნაირი ერთნაირი მსოფლმხედველობა აქვს, შევიკრიბებით ხოლმე აქ და ვიმსჯელებთ და ვეცდებით რომ ეს სხდომები არ იყოს უბრალოდ ჰარი-ჰარალო, იყოს სერიოზული და ყავდეს საინტერესო და გამორჩეული მომხსენებლები. საოცარი დღე არის, იმიტომ რომ ამ ინიციატივას დიდი ხანია ვამზადებდით და ვიაზრებდით და აი სწორედ ნინოობას მოგვეცა საშუალება ამ დარბაზის ასე ვთქვათ დაარსებისა არაჩვეულებრივი და უაღრესად საინტერესო სტუმრის მოწვევის წყალობით. დღეს ჩვენს დარბაზს სტუმრობს ბატონი ბრაიან ბრაუნი, მსოფლიოს საოჯახო კონგრესის მშობელი ორგანიზაციის, რომელსაც ქვია International Organization for Families, ანუ საერთაშორისო საოჯახო ორგანიზაცია, პრეზიდენტი და ასევე დამფუძნებელი ამერიკაში ძალიან ცნობილი ორგანიზაციისა, რომელსაც ეწოდება National Organization for Marriage, ანუ ნაციონალური ორგანიზაცია ქორწინებისათვის. ბატონი ბრაუნი არის ალბათ ერთ-ერთი ყველაზე გამორჩეული კონსერვატორი ამერიკის შეერთებულ შტატებში. ძალიან დიდი, ასე ვთქვათ, რეკორდით და ძალიან დიდი დამსახურებების სიით ამერიკულ კონსერვატორულ წრეებში, ადამიანი, რომელსაც უსმენენ რესპუბლიკურ პარტიაში, ადამიანი, რომლის თანამშრომელიც, ყოფილი თანამშრომელიც გახლდათ დონალდ ტრამპის საარჩევნო შტაბის მენეჯერი, რომელმაც მოაგებინა დონალდ ტრამპს ეს არჩევნები და ჩვენს ენაზე რო ვთქვათ, ეს არ არის უბრალო სტუმარი, ეს არ არის უბრალო, ასე ვთქვათ, უცხოელი, ვინც ჩამოვიდა. ბატონი ბრაუნი წარმოშობით არის დაიბადა, გაიზარდა კალიფორნიის შტატში, ორენჯ კაუნტიში, სადაც რომელიც სხვათა შორის ცნობილი არის თავისი კონსერვატიული ფესვებით, აი ეს ნაწილი შეერთებული შტატებისა. განათლებით გახლავთ ისტორიკოსი და სადოქტორო კანდიდატი. მისი სპეციალობის სფერო არის დიდი ბრიტანეთის ისტორია 19 საუკუნის პირველ ნახევარში და იგი გახლავთ, ასე ვთქვათ, ახალი ტალღის კონსერვატორი მოაზროვნე, რომელიც აგრძელებს იმ ტრადიციას, რომელიც ამერიკის შეერთებული შტატების ფილოსოფიურ და ინტელექტუალურ სკოლებში დაიბადა გასული საუკუნის 40-იან 50-იან წლებში. ბატონი ბრაუნი არის ძალიან ხშირი სტუმარი ამერიკის შეერთებული შტატების ყველა წამყვან სატელევიზიო მასმედია საშუალებებში, რომლებიც მოგეხსენებათ 90%-ზე მეტი გახლავთ ულტრალიბერალური ყაიდის, ამიტომ იქ მას მტრობენ, მაგრამ იმდენად საინტერესო და ხარიზმატული თანამოსაუბრეა, რომ ვერსად ვერ გაურბიან და უწევთ მისი დაპატიჟება. Washington Post-ი წერს ბატონ ბრაიანზე, რომ ის მამათმავლობას უპირისპირდება თავისი უდრეკი ნორმალურობით და ღიმილით და ამიტომ არის აუღებელი ციხე. აი ესეთი დაახლოებით ეპითეტებით ამკობენ მას თვით აი ამ ლიბერალური ბასტიონის ბოსებიც კი. ჩემთვის პირადად ბრაიანი არის, მე ამითი ვხარობ და ვამაყობ, უახლოესი მეგობარი, მისი კარიერა, მისი მოღვაწეობა უფლის განგებით რაღაცნაირად ძალიან მჭიდროდ დაუკავშირდა საქართველოს, იმიტომ რომ თიკოს მიერ ნახსენები აქ ჩატარებული თუ გახსოვთ 2016 წელს მსოფლიო საოჯახო მე-10 საიუბილეო კონგრესის ფარგლებში დირექტორთა საბჭომ ამ კონგრესისა მიიღო გადაწყვეტილება, რომ ბრაიანი აერჩია პრეზიდენტად IOF-ის და ამრიგად ბრაიანისთვის თბილისი რაღაც უსაყვარლესი და ძალიან ახლობელი ქალაქი გახდა. ბრაიანთან მე გარდა ამისა მაკავშირებს ორი რამ. რამდენიმე წელია ვეჯიბრებით ერთმანეთს შვილების რაოდენობაში და ვერაფრით ვერ ვეწევი, იმიტომ რომ გავაჩენ შვილს და ბრაიანს თავის მეუღლეც აჩენდა, ყავს დღემდე ჯერ კიდევ ჩვენზე ერთით მეტი შვილი, ანუ ჩვენ ყავს 8 შვილი და ბრაიანს ყავს 9 შვილი. და არის ვაშკაცი კაცი, ქართულად რომ ვთქვა, ჯიგარი კაცი, მორაგბე წარმოიდგინეთ და საქართველოზე შეყვარებული ადამიანი. დარიალში მოგზაურობისას 2 დღის წინ ძალიან ავად გაგვიხდა და კიდევ ერთხელ დაამტკიცა თავისი რაღაც მედგარი სულისკვეთება, იმიტომ რომ მიუხედავად აი უმძიმესი რაღაც გრიპისა, რომელიც შეეყარა ჩვენთან, ყველაფერი გააკეთა იმისთვის, რომ არც გუშინ გამოეტოვებინა პრესკონფერენცია და არც დღეს დაეღალატებია თქვენთვის და წარდგება დღეს თქვენთან სიცხისა და აი ამ რაღაც ავადმყოფობის მიუხედავად, ამიტომ მოდით მივესალმოთ მას და მოусმინოთ ყურადღებით.
Well, first I would like to thank my brother Levon for inviting me here and hosting me again in Georgia. This is my second visit. The first visit was really life-changing. I was elected to be president of the International Organization for the Family, but I also, more importantly, met so many friends here in Georgia. People from around the world had came here for the event, and I remember looking up as we were marching together towards the cathedral, and I was sort of pinching myself, asking, how did I get here? How am I a part of this? And you know, your patriarch came and spoke to us, and so many amazing experiences all at once. And I knew at that time that I would come back, and it's been a great few days being back here. Now, what I'm going to try and do here is to, in 30 minutes, lay out where conservatism is in the United States under Trump and where I think it's going. But in order to answer those questions, I first have to lay out the history of conservatism to some degree in the United States, because nothing really makes sense. The Trump election doesn't make sense. The internal fighting within the conservative movement doesn't make sense unless we go a lot further back. Conservatism in the US did not rise up as one thing. Back in 1948, the literary critic Lionel Trilling in his book, The Liberal Imagination, said liberalism is not only the dominant intellectual tradition in American life, it is the only tradition in American life. So back in the 40s, you have to ask yourself, why would Trilling feel compelled to say this? Already in the 40s in America, there were a group of intellectuals that were beginning to question the narrative that America was built on constant change, constant progress, that there was nothing fixed or absolute in American life, that religion didn't play a particularly important role, and that religion was more a civic religion that bound people together rather than something that was heartfelt and lived and experienced. Trilling was wrong, and in only 2 or 3 years beyond Trilling making that statement, we see a huge explosion in conservative thinking and really the beginnings of a conservative intellectual movement in the United States. Now, as I said, it didn't start as one thing. To probably oversimplify, there were 3 major components to the beginning of a conservative tradition, at least an intellectual tradition, a modern intellectual tradition in the United States. Number 1 were social conservatives. Especially following the US Supreme Court decision in 1962, Engel versus Vitale. That was a decision that banned public prayer in schools. Even before that, people were starting to see that the courts in the United States had a vision of religion that the people themselves did not. There had been no major lawsuits over prayer in public schools. It had existed from the very beginning of the American Republic all the way into the 50s. No one really questioned it. And yet, in the early 60s, late 50s, a group of increasingly strident liberals wanted to erase religion from the public square and launched a lawsuit which, in effect, removed prayer from our schools. This was met with disbelief and a significant pushback on the part of social conservatives. So one key component was that liberals were increasingly pushing to change what had been the accepted sort of paradigm that you can be an atheist, you can not believe in religion, but you at least have to respect that the majority of Americans believe in God, and that our public life would accommodate this belief. Now, of course, America is not like Georgia, not like other countries that have a more, I wouldn't say unitary, but more clear, shared single religion. Of course, we're pluralistic in the sense that we had many different religions, I shouldn't say religions, really the overwhelming majority of Americans would say that they're Christian. At the time, we're talking about 92%. But of course, some were Baptists, some were Methodists, some were Quakers, some were Catholics. But there was a shared understanding that, yeah, we have differences, those differences are important, but disallowing public prayer is not something that's going to help those differences. In fact, it'll divide us more. So I use the Supreme Court decision as simply a window into the reaction on the part of, at the time, they wouldn't call themselves social conservatives. They were simply Americans who couldn't believe that the America that they had known and loved was now at a point where we couldn't even pray in schools. And there was a big reaction. Evangelical Christians launched marches. There were speeches. There were pastors condemning the Supreme Court. It was a big deal. This is just one of many decisions, some of them not decisions by courts, but an increasing feeling on the part of Americans that faith was being pushed aside in the interest of pleasure, in the interest of a new understanding of what America was. And obviously, with the sexual revolution, that even became more clear. Again, already in the 50s, there were feelings that we were going in the wrong way, but by the time of the early 60s, clearly something had gone wrong. We have Playboy magazine hitting the shelves. Many small markets refuse to publish it, but Hugh Hefner and others keep pushing and pushing and pushing. We have court decisions saying that what had always been the case in American life, that there was censorship. It was a clear part of our law that certain types of prurient material are not allowed to be distributed. This was always a part of our law. But again, lawsuit after lawsuit launched. Instead of resolving this through democracy or through votes, instead we saw courts coming in and telling people, no, states can't ban Playboy. Well, they had been able to do that all the way up until the 60s. So that's one key component. Now, there were great thinkers that get very little respect or even study in the US, let alone abroad, that started writing books defending traditionalism, social conservatism, whatever you'd like to call it. The one that has influenced me greatly is Russell Kirk. Russell Kirk was he studied at St. Andrews in Scotland. He liked to wear Scottish robes. He was sort of a romantic figure in American life. He, at his ancestral home in Mecosta, Michigan, brought in a whole slew of graduate students and other thinkers who were willing to question the premise that America was, is, and ever will be a liberal nation. He wrote a book called The Conservative Mind, which attempted to trace conservative thinking all the way up until when the book was published in 1964. That book got on the cover of Time magazine. So this wasn't just our own little author that a few folks heard of and was willing to question the orthodoxy on liberalism. It was a big deal. The book sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Thank you. The book sold hundreds of thousands of copies, and even, as I said, Time magazine took seriously the idea that, look, there's a serious thinker questioning the dominance of liberalism in American life. Now, Russell was clearly a social conservative. He was clearly a traditionalist. In that book, however, as with many of the social conservatives, Russell stood strongly for some version of the free market. He did not believe in state control of the economy. This was always a part, again, always a part of American life. Some level of the entrepreneurial spirit and some level of individual autonomy in the economic sphere. So I will leave the social conservatives now to go to the next group, or the next grouping of conservatives that came together, and that's the economic liberals. Free market libertarians, whatever you want to call them, but basically there was a resurgence of interest in the nature of a free market, in the nature of free market thinking, and the intellectuals that played a big role here weren't necessarily Americans. Ludwig von Mises, who was sort of the leader of the Austrian School of Economics, played a big role in America at this time. The University of Chicago became a sort of haven for people willing to question the Keynesian paradigm that state control, or not state control, but state direction of the economy is a solution to solving problems of supply and demand. So there were a number of books, Friedrich von Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, the whole Chicago School. They played a big role in sort of bringing back the idea that, well, Adam Smith was not just some, old thinker, but that there were applications to the present. Now, whatever you think about free market economics, at the time, the second school of conservative thought, naturally there were allegiances between the social conservatives and the economic liberals. We now know that there are also areas that they cannot agree on, but at the time, especially because of the rise of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, all of the differences between traditionalists and free market liberals were pushed aside because the great fear was the fear of communism, was the fear of statism. And this shared enemy allowed these two groups, which, again, may share some things, for example, their questioning of state control, but on other areas do not share anything at all. And I'll talk a little bit about those areas in a second. So a third area of conservative thinking were the foreign policy conservatives, the anti-communists. This is what helped bind the other two groups, everyone together. Because everyone in America who defined themselves or thought of themselves as a conservative in the 50s and 60s, all of them were anti-communist. All of them saw the Soviet Union and the attack on religion, faith, free will, human dignity as one of the largest threats posed to mankind. This was shared across the board. And you see this in the early journals of conservatism, the first being National Review. Bill Buckley creates a journal of a weekly journal called National Review. And he brings together a motley crew of dissidents from liberalism. There were interesting characters like Erich von Kuhnelt-Ledeen, who was a Austrian thinker who wrote a book called Liberty or Equality. And the book is all about despising equality and loving liberty. At the same time, there were fairly mainstream economists. But they all come together, and the first issues of National Review are all about the communist threat. The threat of communists within the United States, the threat of what this means for our allies around the world. The Cold War allows these three groups to put aside any differences they may have and unite together under one banner of conservatism. And I think even liberal historians would agree with my analysis. Some of them would even go further and say there were no natural allegiances between the social conservatives and the economic liberals, and it was only the Cold War that allowed them to unite together. I think they have a point. Now, I'm going to have to skip over a lot of history that I think is important, but with the fall of the wall, with the demise of the Soviet Union, this enemy that bound together these different groupings, once this enemy falls apart, these different groupings realize that they don't actually always have that much in common. Statism, of course, social conservatives continue to oppose. But they begin to realize that corporate interests, Wall Street, big international corporations, increasingly don't have the interest of of Christians in the United States at heart. They could care less. They want to make money. And they see increasingly that these corporations are endorsing positions that we as Christians can never accept. So early on, the issue over the legalization of marijuana in the United States. It didn't end up going anywhere, but there ends up being a conflict within conservatism that sort of gets muted, but it exists. The libertarians say, why not? We've wasted all of this money on the drug war. Let's just legalize marijuana. Let's be done with it and have a market around it that can be controlled. Religious Americans say, no way we're going to allow this. The market doesn't dictate what's good or what's evil. There are certain things that the market doesn't have the right to control. The market doesn't get to dictate, for example, prostitution. And you have some libertarians going so far to say, well, yes, the market does, and arguing for the legalization of prostitution. So these two groups, which had stood united against communism, now are at war with each other and realize that they don't have as much in common as they thought. In example after example, it starts to become clear to religious conservatives or social conservatives that they've been abandoned by those that were their allies. This is also true on foreign policy. You start getting a division within American conservatism on foreign policy relatively quickly after the end of the Cold War. Pat Buchanan runs for president and ends up winning some early states. Buchanan was one of Reagan's speechwriters. He has a perfect credentials as far as the conservative movement goes. I mean, all of us idolized Reagan. To have someone like Buchanan running for president, great. But Buchanan starts to realize that the traditional foreign policy that we've engaged in, the foreign policy of limiting or rolling back communism, now all of the money and all of the effort, again, we had said we oppose statism, yet we're spending billions of dollars on defense. All of that effort is now being used to expand, in the words of neoconservatives, democracy abroad and to nation build. And Pat Buchanan says, no, this is not what conservatism is. We should limit our involvement abroad. There are certain areas we need to be involved in, we're involved in, but only if it's in America's direct interest. And this divide is important to understand because it exists to this day. Okay, so the divisions between these three groups grow. President Trump enters the equation. When Trump runs, he doesn't run on the traditional Republican fusionism platform. These three groups I just laid out, the fact that they are willing to put aside their differences and be seen as conservatives, this comes to be termed fusionism, that we're going to somehow fuse together social conservatism, economic liberalism, and foreign policy hawkishness, for lack of a better term. Trump is not a part of any of this. He has certain inclinations, but he's not really a part of the conservative movement at all. His inclinations are America first, limiting our involvement abroad. He talks about this a ton. He's super critical and is willing to say things that no earlier presidential candidates are willing to say against what has come to be seen as just the oppressive and totalitarian nature of our liberal media, which everyone loves to hear that's a conservative. Even if they don't view Trump as a part of conservatism, they're saying he's finally saying the things that no one else is willing to say. And on religion, obviously Trump doesn't come from a religious background. He doesn't come from a social conservative milieu. He's a New York elite billionaire. But he's willing to say the things that many religious conservatives have been craving for. He's willing to say that he's willing to strongly stand against abortion. He's willing to agree in private meetings and also public meetings with leading social conservatives, he's willing to say, yes, when I get into office, I will nominate a pro-life Supreme Court justice. So he's willing to go pretty far in that direction. The irony is that coming from this New York corporate successful background, he's also willing to call out the free market corporatist interests that want free and open borders for cheap labor. It wouldn't seem to make sense that he has the position he has, but he does. So for a number of reasons, he offers each group, each of these three groups, something new. And at the end of the day, when everyone, I remember my wife calling me and saying, did you see the election returns? No one, even in the United States, very few people believed Trump had the possibility of winning. But because he gave each of these groups something, he won. That's my view. Now, where conservatism goes from here is a lot more difficult question to answer. The differences between these three groups are actually larger than they've ever been before. It's clear over the course of the last, especially 15 years, that corporate America is at war with religious America. It is at open war. What do I mean? Well, in state after state, we had referenda on the definition of marriage. Liberals wanted to change the definition of marriage through same-sex marriage, and they were trying to do it through the courts in the states, so groups like ours ran referenda, where every single person in 32 states had the chance to vote, and 31 states voted to protect marriage as the union of a man and a woman, and only in our most liberal states, 3 states, did they vote for same-sex marriage. In each of those states, we started to see Amazon, Starbucks, the huge corporate money dropping $10 million, $15 million to support the pro-same-sex marriage position. Now, up until this point, most corporations were very scared to get too involved with a political question where their consumers were on both sides. But during the 90s and in the early 2000s, most of these corporations basically made a decision that they were going to throw fully in with liberalism. They were going to spend their money. They were going to have speech codes so that in some of these workplaces, if you have a sticker in your cubicle that says marriage is the union of a man and a woman, they started firing people. So this division is stronger than it's ever been before. This division between what corporations, what big money in the US, what direction they want to go, and in the direction where the common, regular American wants to go. In foreign policy, I think some of the failures of the last presidencies, Iraq, Afghanistan, have, I think for many conservatives, there's been a movement away from, I think neoconservatism is at a low point right now. Meaning, I think many conservatives are rethinking what America's policy goals should be around the world, and really are moving in a direction of limiting our involvement, which I'm very happy about. Again, this is an area where Trump has a clear way that he wants to go. Now, just because he wants to go in that direction doesn't mean that everyone else around him, as we discussed, the deep state wants to go in that direction. But we'll see. We'll see what direction this takes. There will be an internal battle within conservatism to sort of define which way we go. because this isn't one of the questions where we can come to compromise on. To say America needs to stop going into other countries to nation build, and to say we have an obligation to go into countries to nation build, there's no halfway point. This is one of the issues where conservatives are going to have to choose. And again, anything can happen, but given a lot of the qualms that even people who were rock solid supporters of many of our endeavors abroad now have, I'm hopeful that a more humble, a more careful foreign policy can be crafted. So, what about the key issues relating to life and family? Well, the shared anti-statism of conservatives remains, and our experience over the last 40 years at the hand of the courts makes that even stronger. You have to understand, Americans didn't vote for abortion. Americans didn't vote for gay marriage. In 1974, our Supreme Court said that abortion will be legal in every state in the country. That was not a decision of the people. That was the court taking to itself a right it never had, which is the right to legislate. From there, the court gained more and more power until in 5 short years ago, it decided, again, not with a vote of the people, that marriage, which was always understood for what it is, the union of a man and a woman, the court had the hubris to say that it could redefine the fundamental nature of what it means to be male and female, husband and wife, with its decision on same-sex marriage. So conservatives remained very united in their skepticism of the state's role in deciding these issues. We've fared much better in the United States when the people have a say in these things than when elites decide to decide for us. That remains very strong. And there is an anger, there's a palpable anger in the United States over what elites have done to the regular American. There's an anger, and I think, again, that played a role in Trump's election. I think there will have to be a lot of thinking and a lot more intellectual work done in the next few years. I'm sad to say that from the 50s and 60s, where we had a number of conservative intellectuals, what's happened in America is that conservatism has gone from something that people really thought about, discussed, wrote books about, to something that became a commodity. It could be sold on radio shows, it could be sold on t-shirts, and people could make a lot of money. And so what ended up happening is we don't really have the sort of thinkers that we did in the 50s or 60s. We don't have conservative thinkers. What we have are shock jocks, radio talk show hosts. There's not a lot of thinking, unfortunately, that's going on right now. There's a lot of reacting. That does not bode well for the future of the movement, especially at a time when there's so much fracturing going on, and fusionism, in my view, is falling apart. This should be a time where we have great intellectuals saying, what is our response to neoliberalism? How do we limit the fact that these corporations are making huge sums of money off of Americans while at the same time undermining their interests? These are not really, sad to say, questions that are dealt with publicly. I'm hopeful that if we can figure out some way to do the hard thinking necessary, we'll end up in a good place. But I think the biggest change is the realization that we're not alone. America can be quite an insular place. We don't think much about other countries, other cultures, other traditions. That's a bad thing. I think that through the World Congress of Families and through other groups that are starting to, at least attempting to bring people together who have shared values around the world, that there's an increasing realization that what we confront, we're not alone in. That although, of course, there are beautiful differences that we have, that around the world, whether I'm in Budapest at the World Congress of Families, or I'm in Malawi at an African regional event, people are upset. They can't believe that the family is being undermined. They can't believe that George Soros is coming into their country and trying to change who they are as people. There is a shared feeling among people who have come from radically different cultures, that something has to be done to stand up for their own national interest, their own identity. And that, I think, is the most hopeful sign, not only for American conservatism, but for some renewed and stronger pushback against liberalism's spread around the world. I'm not sanguine in the short term. The amount of money and power that is arrayed against us is massive. George Soros just decided to give $18 billion, I'm making this up, $18 billion, larger than many economies, of his personal money to the Open Society Foundation. He has a plan. He's been ruthless in following the plan, and he's affecting countries around the world. When you go to a very small, one of the poorest countries in the world, as I said, I was just in Malawi. You go to Malawi and you realize that Soros and other NGOs are actually trying to go into a country like Malawi, very poor, but still very family focused, and change their curriculum for kindergartners and first graders to start to bring in gender ideology. You realize the scope of what we face. So we're going to need a lot of prayer. I think we're going to need a lot more unity. We're going to need people like leaders like Viktor Orban and others that are willing to go toe-to-toe with Soros and others. But I think most importantly, it's going to take a little bit of humility on all of our parts, that we come from different traditions. We come from different political systems. But we're all in this boat together if we don't stand and join together and fight in any way we can against the attempt to undermine each of our cultures, each of our nations, all of our identity. Thank you very much.
Brian, many thanks for the wonderful, most informative and profound overview of what you do. At this point, I would like to ask our friends in the audience to give some questions if they have, and I'm sure they will be interested to give us some questions. We have some acting politicians and thinkers and students in the audience, and therefore let us, if you still have it in you, I know you're struggling with your flu, let's spend a few minutes on Q&A. So Dimitri Guram, ვისაც გნებავთ, იქნებ გადავიდეთ ახლა შეკითხვების ფორმატში და დაუსვათ ნებისმიერი შეკითხვა, რომელიც გვაინტერესებს და კი ბატონო და ბრაიანს, თუ შეიძლება წარადგინეთ თქვენი თავი შეკითხვის დასმის წინ, მოგართმევთ მიკროფონს და თუ გნებავთ, ჩვენ სპეციალურად შევიკრიბეთ და სხვათა შორის თუ ვინმეს დახმარება სჭირდება დაეხმარეთ ერთმანეთს, ვინც გვერდ-გვერდებს ხედავთ თარგმანით და მივცეთ მიკროფონი თიკო და თარგმნოთ ვისაც როგორ უნდა რა, ვიყოთ თავისუფლად. გთხოვთ.
სოსო ზალიშვილი. მე ესეთი კითხვა მაქვს ბატონო ბრაიანმა, ბევრი საუბრა ამ არჩევნების იმდინარეობაზე ამერიკის შეერთებულ შტატებში, მე გულისხმობ 2016 წლის არჩევნები, რომელმაც შეიძლება ითქვას, რომ კონსერვატორული მოძრაობა პრაქტიკულად გადაარჩინა მსოფლიოში. ორ ასპექტზე ელაპარაკა სოციალურ კონსერვატორებზე, ვთქვათ, ეკონომიკურ, ასე ვთქვათ, თავისუფლებაზე ამერიკაში, მაგრამ ერთ ასპექტზე არ უთქვავს არაფერი და ეს მე მაინტერესებს. ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანი იყო 2016 წლის არჩევნებზე მეორე კონსტიტუციის მეორე შესწორებასთან დაკავშირებული პრობლემა. ჩვენ გვახსოვს, რომ დემოკრატებს უნდათ აი ამ მეორე შესწორების, რომელიც იარაღთან არის დაკავშირებული, იარაღის დარებასთან დაკავშირებით არის ამერიკის კონსტიტუციაში მიღებული, ამის გაუქმება უნდათ გამომდინარე ამ თავისი ლიბერალური შეხედულებებიდან. და სწორედ National Rifle Association-მა ძალიან დიდი როლი ითამაშა იმაში, რომ ტრამპმა გაიმარჯვა. აი ამ საკითხზე თუ შეიძლება რამდენი მესიტყვით, რომ
Marvelous. So Zalishvili, our friend, is first of all thanking you for your lecture, and having listened to you speak about the two major groups within the conservative movement, the social conservatives and the economic libertarians. He wanted to ask you to cover some of the events that transpired during the elections of 2016 around the issue of the Second Amendment relating to the firearms rights and the role of the National Rifle Association, which we know was fundamental to resisting the Democrats or the liberals' push towards changing the amendment, and what is your view on it, and what is your outlook on the issue?
Well, the most powerful lobby in the United States, other than you brought up AIPAC, I think the single most powerful lobby in the US is the defense of the Second Amendment. It's hard, I think, sometimes for people outside the United States. I know my French friends who are conservative don't understand why I have so many guns. It's just, I don't know how else to say it. It's a part of who we are as people. We hunt, we fish, and we also defend ourselves if someone's going to break into our homes. That's the way we are. I think it seems odd to other people, but this is who we are. It's a part of who we are as a people. And so the National Rifle Association has taken gun ownership and created one of the most significant, the most powerful political forces in American life. I'm a member of the NRA. Most people that I know who are conservative are members of the NRA. Now, Hillary Clinton made some big mistakes because Democrats traditionally have had blue-collar Democrats, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio. These were called the Reagan swing voters. They traditionally are Democrats because the Democratic Party was the party that was viewed as the party of the little guy. And so traditionally, they were Democrats. The Republicans were seen as the country clubbers. What the conservative movement did was change all that. It brought real ideology into the Republican Party. There were real conservatives that came into the Republican Party, and one of these things that became very strong, and it wasn't strong prior to the 50s. The Republicans weren't necessarily the pro-NRA party. The NRA existed, but it didn't have the power it did. It was a very wise move on the part of the Republicans. I think it was also right. And what Hillary did was not realize that many of these blue-collar, former, working in steel mills, in places where a lot of industry had been shut down, that what they had left was their guns. They can go hunting, they can go shooting. This is a part of who they are, and God. And on both of those things, she made some big mistakes. And so she mocked the backwards Trump voters who clung to their guns and their religion. Bad move, because many of those voters are Democrats. And rightfully, in some cases, critical of the Republican Party. Because even though conservatives came within the Republican Party and changed a lot of the country club mentality, it never went away. You know, in Connecticut, in New England, in other places, you still have a lot of, I'm a Republican because I'm wealthy and I want to be able to do what I want with my money, but I don't care about those religious people. So I think you're right. I think that the even small things Hillary did to undermine those God and guns voters put them directly into Trump's voting booth.
მეც თუ შეიძლება ერთ კითხვას დავსვამ და ყველას მივცემ დროს მე ორივე ენაზე ვიტყვი და ჩემი საკითხვაც ეხება ბრაიანის მოხსენების დასასრულს. ბოლო ნაწილს, სადაც ბრაიანი ბრძანებს, რომ მთელი აი იმ სოციალური და საზოგადოებრივი პროცესების შედეგად, რომლებზეც ის გვიყვებოდა, მე ასე ვიტყოდი, ბრაიანი გვეუბნება, რომ კონსერვატიული მოძრაობა გამოიფატრა შეერთებულ შტატებში და თუ გახსოვთ, მან თქვა, რომ კონსერვატიულ ფრთას შეერთებულ შტატებში ამჟამად მისი აზრით არ აყავს ინტელექტუალური ბირთვი და რომ ეს ცუდ სამსახურს უწევს კონსერვატიზმის მომავალ შეერთებულ შტატებში, იმიტომ რომ ამ ბირთვის გარეშე კონსერვატიზმი მხოლოდ რეაქტიულ ხასიათს ატარებს, ანუ რეაგირებს, თქვათ, ლიბერალიზმის შეტევებზე, მაგრამ დადებით დღის წესრიგს ვერ აყალიბებს და მე მინდა ვკითხო მას, რის გარშემო შეიძლება იმ ინტელექტუალური წრეებიდან, რომლებსაც ის იცნობს, აიგოს ეს ახალი ბირთვი და რაც უფრო მნიშვნელოვანია, კერძოდ რაზე უნდა დაეფუძნოს იდეოლოგია თანამედროვე კონსერვატიზმისა შეერთებულ შტატებში. Brian, I want to jump in and ask a question, if I may. Pertaining to the last part of your presentation, where you've concluded basically by saying that the social and economic and liberal propaganda-related events that transpired in the United States over the course of last half a century, you are basically left with, putting it in my own words, with the gutted essence of conservative movement. You said something like, we lack intellectual content in our conservative movement, which both poorly and serves a very bad service for the future of the conservative movement, because you said it is therefore, in the absence of such content, intellectual core, if you will, you believe that conservative movement is largely reactionary or reactive to liberal advances. Let me ask you this. What in your, first of all, two questions, one question but two parts. First of all, who in the conservative circles within your personal visibility are to comprise this new core, which absolutely has to be built? And perhaps more importantly, around what basis ideologically do you think this new content must come into life to give birth or new life to American conservatism? Thank you.
Well, as far as the people that I think are continuing to do intellectual work and would be the core of the sort of new intellectuals for the movement. One would be Professor Robert George. He's a professor at Princeton University. He holds Woodrow Wilson's old chair. He has been able, even though he's a very strong conservative, he's been able to reach the highest levels of academic life. That's not a small victory, because most conservative professors and intellectuals are weeded out pretty quickly from academia. We do not have a free system of education. We don't. If you're a conservative, I have many friends who have gone through getting their doctorate, trying to get placed. If they find out you're a conservative, you're toast. You may be able to teach at a Catholic university, but even there it's difficult. So Professor George, Alan Carlson. There are some others, but you know, some of the people are going to have to be people that we don't yet know. There was sort of a young and vibrant group of conservative intellectuals in the 50s and 60s, and we need that again. I can't answer as to where it's going to come from. I think that those will be the leaders, but I honestly don't know.
What about the ideological part? What are your, the second part of my question was, what is your vision on the contours, at least, of the ideological revival? What should it be based upon? We've touched upon it in some of our previous conversations, but I think the public would be interested in hearing.
Well, it's like, you know, it's like Charles Dickens' novel. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. You know, on some level, I'm laying out a picture that's not very hopeful. But look, you know, on my street, there are 3 families that each have 6 kids or more. They were raised as lukewarm Christians. They decided that this wasn't the life for them. They are now doing something that their parents would have thought was crazy. You know, they have 8 kids. So the lived experience in America, the young people are sort of rejecting hedonism and the idea that, you know, all obligations are evil, and I'm going to be happy if I you know, don't get married, etc., etc. That there is a rejection of that, so that's good. As far as the intellectual contours of it, of how to take that and connect it with a broader movement, I think the core will be, I believe in some version of the free market. I don't think that the state should dictate everything about our lives. But that doesn't mean that I'm ideologically committed to libertarianism or some abstract notion of the free market dictating what is good. Before there's a market, there is the good. And so what I think needs to happen is for conservatism to essentially say what it always was the social conservatives. Economic liberalism is not conservatism. It may be a path to attack statism, but it is not the same thing. And to have those hard discussions, that will be very contentious, because, as I just said, it's a key part of, like, you know, American life that conservatives believe in some version of the free market, and I believe in some version of the free market. But I don't believe it should dictate what is the good. There are limits. There you know, can be profound limits. So, you know, the biggest problem is that discussion really isn't even taking place. So to ask me what the core is going to be, the core to me of any conservatism, it's going to have a difference, and you may call it something different in different countries. I call it conservatism because I think from the French Revolution to the present, there have been a group of people who said the denial of who we are as human beings, the utopianism of the French Revolution, the attack on religion, which is always key to whatever form liberalism takes. The attack on religion is always key, because religion is that thing that gives people something solid, something pure, something true to hope for, to live for, to guide. And at the center is the family. So again, you know, I call it conservatism. I think that's a good. All I know is that when I go to different places and I talk to people, I immediately know the people that I feel are my brothers, and those are not. So it doesn't really matter what we call it, but what amazes me is that in all of these different countries, there are people fed up, and they share some core beliefs about respect for their faith, respect for their traditions, respect for the centrality of the family. These are all shared. And my second hope is that by us moving in America conservatism for just being insular and about us, and moving outside and going to other places and working with other people, that it will create something new, that will be something that we've never seen before. Some form of international cooperation, movement, I don't know, pro-family, we could have pro-family political parties all around the world. I don't know what it is, but I do know that we're at a time right now where I sense a lot of possibility for something new. That if you would have told me 20 years ago that I would be going around the world, I'd be here in Georgia meeting people who, you know, we sense the same truths. We have the same values. I would have laughed. So something new is happening, and like I said, if you can go to Africa and speak a common language with people and how upset they are about Soros coming into their country, there's something new emerging. So my hope is that it'll be whatever sort of new version or intellectual underpinnings for conservatism that come out of all of this, that there will be a much more international view.
So Soros unites us. We should
I think so. I think, yeah, I hate to say it, but it's easier for a political movement to have a common enemy than not. And that's what I tried to, that's why I kept bringing up the Cold War. Because that, a lot of the, as I said, a lot of the differences in conservatism only emerged after the fall of the Cold War. You know, conservatives said, this is our goal. If we can figure out a way to defeat communism, then the world will be great. But like many things in life, you get what you ask for, and then they have tremendous consequences that you never thought through.
Thank you. Next question.
ნატო კირვალიძე გარემოს დამცველი. მეც ორივე ენაზე დავსახელს. უპირველესად დიდი მადლობა ესეთი საინტერესო ანალიზისთვის. მინდა რამდენადაც გარემოს დამცველი ვარ, მინდა ჩემი შეკითხვა ზუსტად ამ კუთხით დავსვა. კონსერვატიზმი, რომელიც იცავს ადამიანის ღირებულებებს, ადამიანურ ღირებულებებს და თქვათ, აი ლაპარაკი იყო იმაზე, რომ შეტევა რელიგიაზე ეს უკვე ძალიან გაცხადებული არის და ამის წინააღმდეგ ტალღა წამოვიდა. რამდენად და თქვენ ასევე ლაპარაკობთ წინასაარჩევნო პლატფორმაზე და ანალიზში ჩანდა ეს ისა. გარემოზე შეტევა ლიბერალებისგან, ნეოლიბერალებისგან და ის კონსერვატიული მიდგომები, რომელიც თავისთავად მოიცავს ამ ღირებულებების დაცვას. როგორც ჩანს დღევანდელ ამერიკის პოლიტიკაში და არის თუ არა განსხვავება არჩევნების წინა პლატფორმასა და მიმართულებას შორის, რომელიც დღეს აქვს ამერიკას აღებული. My name is Nato Kirwalitze and I'm an environmentalist. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for a very interesting analysis of the situation, especially starting from the history and then giving us this prism of the electoral cut. I would like to ask you where is the environmentalism at the moment in the conservatism that is opposing the attack to the traditions, to the religion, to the family values, to the human values, and to the values that conservatists also value when talking about protecting the environment, which is also our tradition and something that humans understand very well. Whether there was a message that was also close to such groups in the electoral campaign, and where is the future, especially also as we hear it with with the decisions like appointing Pruitt as EPA head, who is not so popular among environmentalists. Just to mention that, probably Reagan was one of the most environmentalist governors in California, and the result is seen that it's one of the most environmental states in the United States. So, how do you see this part? Thank you.
Well, as with many, most aspects of American life, the environmentalism has become so politicized that right now, many Republicans don't remember that Teddy Roosevelt was one of the most environmentalist presidents around, creating most of our first national parks. And instead, because the environmental movement has, in the United States, the leaders of the environmental movement have allied themselves with the pro-abortion movement, that's created a situation where even conservatives that understand that the natural environment has to be protected, they don't want to deal with the environmentalist groups, because the environmentalist groups are pro-abortion and are working side by side to undermine the family. So you have this huge division where I do think that this is another area where something new has to emerge. Because as you said, originally, a key part of early conservatism was to also conserve the natural environment. And so you had Teddy Roosevelt creating the national parks. It was a little different ideology than some environmentalists have, which is basically like nature versus man, that nature is in some way more important than man, and that man is like a cancer on nature. This is one view, and some American environmentalists are very open that this is their view. The conservationist view was very different. It was that it was man in nature, that we need to figure out some way to symbiotically live within our environment and protect the national treasures that we have. There's been very little discussion of this within conservative thinking. There are some interesting people that are talking about that, for example, the natural ecology of the family. You've had Pope Francis has mentioned this phrase, the natural ecology of marriage, which is very interesting. But again, it's the same sort of answer. As far there's going to need to be a lot of thinking for that to be integrated into a larger conservative framework. Right now, it really doesn't exist, and most people who would identify as conservatives are very unsympathetic to the environmentalist movement, and in some part, that's a fault of the environmentalist movement for joining so closely with neoliberalism. So I'm not saying they're right, but when you say you're an environmentalist in the US right now, it's like saying, I'm an extreme liberal. It didn't used to be this way. So I think probably conservationism, some other word will have to be used. I agree with you in the importance of protecting the natural environment. I'm just saying, right now we're so divided on this issue, I don't think it's going to be resolved quickly.
Thank you. We're going to take 3 more questions, please. You have it in you, Brian, for 3 more?
Yes.
Thank you. Todd.
Merabi Urushatze, it's a professor in Tbilisi's University of Film and Theater. I don't want to go too far because you're tired and you're sick, so I will be really short. Thank you for telling us this information, what's happening in the United States. I'm an American citizen myself, and I know what's happening right now with FBI and all this Russian gate and all that stuff. But you mentioned this really important organization that basically drives the force in American politics like today, that is called IPAC. And I want to like have a like question you what you think about it. And the second question will be what do you think about this plan and for North American Union? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, this is another area of massive division within conservatism. Evangelicals in the United States strongly defend and protect Israel. This is a key part of American politics. It's a fundamental reality. Then we also have people like Pat Buchanan, who I brought up earlier, who ran for president, that was questioning of America, whether it's in America's interest to always be the first one in defense of Israel. Now, as soon as Pat Buchanan said this, he was labeled an anti-Semite. The first thing that happens when you have any criticism whatsoever of our foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel is this occurs. I honestly, again, this is a division that is so profound, and I think it's hard for people outside the U.S. to understand the significance of the evangelical voting bloc. And the evangelicals in the United States have a very particular view of Israel. So IPAC has tremendous power and importance. North American Union, you asked? Yeah. Anything like this, any like attempts to create quasi-sovereignty of multi-state actors, conservatives, this is one area we're generally united that we would totally oppose. Most of us, were not, I was not for NAFTA, but again, at least I hope that my presentation shows you the divisions that are so inherent into conservatism in the U.S. Obviously, the economic libertarians were all for NAFTA. And that's why we ended up getting it. I wish I had a better answer for you. I think it's a key division within the Republican Party and conservatism, but I don't think that the Republican Party is going to in any way abandon or change anytime soon its support for Israel. It's too deep in the evangelical view of the world, and even at times where I've been involved in certain discussions and debates relating to this issue, and even just bringing up that maybe this shouldn't be a top-level commitment for Republican presidential candidates. People get very upset about. So I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Thank you. Gurams kondam gonne shekitva, ხო?
თუ შეიძლება ქართულად შევეკითხები გურამ ფალავანდიშვილო. ესე იგი ჩვენ ტრამპის დიდი მადლობა და ჩვენ ტრამპის გამარჯვების მერე ის მოვაწყეთ მიტინგები მოვაწყეთ გამოვედით ხალხი და რაღაც დიდი იმედი ქონდა რომ და ეხაც გვაქვს მაინც რაღაც პოლიტიკა შეიძლება მაგრამ ოთ მინდა ამბობთ თუ ალბათ საქმეს გულშია რომ ფაქტიურად საქართველოს ხელისუფლებაში მთავარ მასმედიაში იყო ტრამპის ოპოზიციის მუხტი და ფაქტობრივად ეხლაც თქვა ტრამპის კონდა ეხლა აბორტების წინააღმდეგ გამოსვლა არაფერი არ გაშუქებულა თითქოს ჩასაფრებული არის მთელი ჩვენი ეს მასმედია ჩვენი ვინც არის აქ იგივე ელჩი რომელიც აქ მოღვაწეობს არავით არის პრო-ლაიფის ყოფრი არა პირიქით ისევ აი ამ სუდი ძალების ლიბერალების ის არის გაფრთხილებელი და თუ ვთქვა და მიუწვდებათ ხმარ ვთქვა რომ მიადგება თქვა საქართველოში ფაქტობრივად არის ამერიკის დღევანდელი ხელისუფლების საწინააღმდეგო ხელისუფლება და თუ ჩვენი პარტნიორი იცოდეს რომ აქ არის მისი მტრობა აი ამ რეგულირებების თუ სწორად გამოთქვი მადლობთ.
Graham is saying that many conservatives in Georgia or traditionalists were very positive and hopeful upon the victory of Donald Trump in the elections, and many of them have expected radical changes in the US policy in a country such as ours. And not only nothing has changed, but it continued at an aggressive and rapid pace. And Guram has cited, Palavandishvili has cited a recent example when some social activities and rallies were held against abortion in Georgia, and entire Georgian official side, the government, the media has completely ignored these events. He also spoke about current ambassador of United States to Georgia, Young Kelly, who was alongside with our liberal media and our parliamentary majority, seemed like a very strong supporter of Hillary Clinton in the elections. He didn't even bother to hide it. He was very pro-Clinton and anti-Trump. But nonetheless, he remained the ambassador and continues through the US Embassy, which is very influential in Georgia, to continue supporting liberal anti-family policies and nothing pro-life, nothing conservative about it. So Guram's sort of proposal or request or question was quite blunt. You know, can you help us voice these concerns in the United States, and what can be done to bring US Embassy's policies in Georgia to be coherent with the announced policies of the president of your country? Thank you.
Sadly, I agree with you 100%. Now, your ambassador will be changed in 3 months. But the larger question of the promise and the failure of the first years of the Trump presidency, it's a fundamental reality that almost all of us were disappointed. One issue when it relates to foreign policy where I had my greatest hopes is that Donald Trump is not a political insider. He didn't have a list of people to appoint as ambassadors when he came in, and almost immediately he had to deal with threats of the Russia investigation and all of these other attacks. Now, many of us knew people that we thought would be great as ambassadors, and many names were put forward. But even to this day, I may be wrong, but I think probably he's only filled a third of the ambassadorships with his people. Personnel is policy, and that is a blatant failure. So, you know, I don't know how to help more. We've tried. We will continue to try. I do think things will change when you get it. I'm hopeful things will change when you get a new ambassador. One other factor, you know, again, may just be that out of all of Trump's priorities, he doesn't realize that filling the ambassadorships should not be like a low priority, it should be a high one. That's the only other thing that I can think of. But it's not just this. It's the State Department, the FBI, the CIA. In every area where you could, if you really wanted to come in and do something radical, you would just come in and fire everyone. You know, maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe you fire most of them. But if you really wanted to make a change, you would have to do something pretty radical because the power is so entrenched. And he hasn't done that. And to me, it would almost be better to just go in and actually do something really extreme, because they're going to scream and cry like you did something extreme no matter what. But that hasn't happened. It hasn't happened in the United States necessarily either, in our own posts. So, you know, we'll keep trying, we'll keep hoping, but if I'm not mistaken, I think you will be getting a new ambassador relatively soon.
Thank you. Last question, please. Before the last question is asked, Brian is not going anywhere. We'll hang around for a few minutes. There are some cookies and mineral water on the table, so everybody will get a chance to interact with Brian, hopefully, and ask his questions. I beg your patience and mercy, because Brian is not feeling very well. So let's do our best. And then after this, I want to ask Dimitri, Soso, and maybe Soso and Guram to stay for a brief separate meeting. Last question, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I'm particularly happy that today I met the president of the family organization. And so I'm Irina Bakhtadze, professor of International Black Sea University, and also the United States Education and Scientific Program alumni. So right now we are working on many topics at our department, and one of the topics that we are really working on right now is the changes that the American family has undergone for the last maybe 60 years, since 1950s. So so-called American traditional family has changed a lot. And not only in structure and in quality, but also the ideology has changed. And the attitude, the society's attitude towards the American traditional family has changed as well. So, well, it's a very broad question, I understand, but could you please give us a few reasons why it is happening right now? And maybe because we connect this with the also the feminization of the society, and also that the women has become very powerful, that in terms of economy and finances and involvement in the in women leadership, everything, you know, from this point of view has been studied, this problem. So I know that it is a very, very broad topic, but could you please give briefly a few just reasons? How do you see this problem? How do you view this problem? And what could be done to refer to this problem? So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that I will find many interesting materials on your site, right? Yeah. So I hope so. Thank you.
Well, back in 1954, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a professor and a Democratic senator, this is back when Democrats could also be conservative. In some ways, Daniel Patrick Moynihan was willing to say things that no one else was willing to say at the time. He issued his Moynihan report, which at the time basically looked at the black family and raised the alarm, saying, in the black family, 20% of the kids are being born outside of wedlock. And he started to look at what this meant for the future. And he did a very elaborate report highlighting that these kids have higher rates of incarceration, higher rates of alcoholism, that it's not always the case, but in general, the kids that were being raised outside of the confines of the traditional family were suffering. So what ended up happening is that this problem that first showed itself very clearly within the black family, it only took 5 years to jump over into all families in the US. So one of the biggest social changes we have in the United States is that we're now at the point where either divorce or out of wedlock births, we're almost to the point where 40% of children are going to be raised in this way. And this has a disastrous effect all around on so many different issues. In fact, this whole notion of same-sex marriage probably couldn't even have taken hold unless we'd already deconstructed marriage and family to make it primarily about adult desires. Marriage in most traditional cultures, marriage is understood as serving the needs of children. Marriage is about men and women coming together and creating a stable environment for any children that they may bear. And the assumption is, if you're married, not everyone's going to have kids, but the assumption is the possibility is there, and you want the family to be stable and intact. Well, once the sexual revolution helped to usher in a new age in understanding about what marriage is, marriage becomes primarily not about children needs, but adult desires. It's ephemeral, it's not lifelong. Marriage is conceived of as simply a stronger type of friendship that can be broken at any point if either party views it as limiting. Only at the point where you start conceiving of marriage like this do we even start to conceive of same-sex marriage. Why? Because if marriage is only about adult desires, and I'm a man, I desire to marry a man, then if there's no core to what marriage is, the society has a difficult time in saying, why not? We already gutted publicly the understanding of marriage when we divorced it from children. So I think that there are indications that things are actually starting to get better. I mentioned friends that I have who, their parents had one and they thought, that's plenty. And now to be radical now is to go out and say, yeah, I'm going to have like as many kids as possible. There is a rebellion going on, and that's already starting to play a role in demographics in the U.S. I'm not saying it's enough, but modernization theory and secularization theory would have us believe that these trends are only going to go in one direction. They're inevitable, and that as people are able to acquire more goods, as people are able to find satisfaction in things other than religion, they'll get more secular, they'll have less children, 2 is enough. What we're starting to see in some Western countries, especially in the US, is a reverse. People are starting to have more children. So I don't view these things as inevitable. I think it's going to require a number of things, including state policy. Any policies that are pronatalist, I support. We don't really have them in the U.S. I was talking with Levon. I have 9 children. I don't get any help for, high school, college. There's no. Now in Hungary, you have 3 children. The government gives you $1,500 stipend each month for an apartment. In Russia, you have all sorts of policies that are aimed at increasing the birth rate, including stipends, money for additional children. I think countries are going to have to seriously reconsider their policies in light of the demographic nightmare they're about to face. I'm not saying short term, it takes a lot to change birth rates. It's not going to be, there's going to be no quick fix. But little movements in the right direction over time, I think, will get us into the right place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Madloba gadauchadot, Brian Samtausi. Please have a seat and let me conclude. Dear Brian, I think I speak for everyone when I say we cannot thank you enough for this. What a rare privilege and what a rare treat to have you with us. We are occupied by totalitarian ideology, which strips us of not only forums and opportunities where we can interact, but also of basic information on what is going on in the world. And I think getting a first-hand insight into the tendencies in American politics from someone as important, as active, as successful as yourself is just a rare privilege. I cannot believe it happened. and sitting in this wonderful hall in this wonderful, beautiful Caucasian winter. Today we have announced that we will be launching what we have called a national discussion club. And this was first meeting of the National Discussion Club. And what a wonderful privilege and honor to have you open its first working session. I think, as we have discussed in our previous private conversations, as another yet totalitarian ideology, namely liberal, is going out of its way to disgrace in countries such as Georgia the image of United States and the image of Western culture in general. We owe it to ourselves. We, the conservative thinkers and citizens of both Georgia, United States, to do everything we can to counter that. So I think our mission here is to relentlessly pursue the goal of presenting the sane and the healthy and the desirable image of America that every Georgian should be curious and interested in. And a family man such as yourself, devoted to his 9 children, to his country, fearless in many ways, we know, I know, what kinds of dangers, oppression, injustice you have to withstand for doing what you do, is a perfect example worth learning from. In many ways, I do think you and people like yourself resisting the totalitarian liberal ideology in its nest are much bigger fighters and much bigger heroes than we living in Eastern societies who are suffering from it, but much less so. We're much less crushed. We're much less, thank God, occupied. I think your point on the utter need for international alliance is extremely important, because a natural tendency of normal people, of decent people, when they see vulgar perversion, is to look away. This is, I think, something we're built with, we're born with. It's our natural instinct. When I see something disgusting, I want to look away. But conservatives and traditionalists have looked away so much for so long that actually we're coming to a point in the history of the planet where there could be nowhere to look, because anywhere you glance, you will see the same picture of disgraced, disgusting and disgracing perversion. Therefore, I think the time may be coming, instead of looking away, unfortunately, to look straight at this malpractice, at this shame, and give an answer to it. And I think your social devotion, your work, your life, is a wonderful example to all of us. I'm extremely happy to have not only a friend, but a brother, as we call each other, like you. This is not a title you give easily to anyone. A brother is someone you're willing to fight with to the end. And cynics may say, what an empty rhetoric, but we know that there is no exaggeration in this. The battles and the wars we fight are very real, and the devotion and, most importantly, the motivation is as real as it gets. We're not doing this for money. We're not doing this for fame. We're doing this for the most important thing we have in this life, which is our children and our families. And so the opponent must know that there is no stopping us, because you have, I always tell them, you have entered and tried to violate something that is the last resort. If I let you pervert my family, if I let you pervert my society, then life is not worth living. So we're extremely fortunate today because, you know, we live our daily lives. We are, all of us here and everywhere in the world, are up to our necks in our daily problems. We rarely get a chance to get out of our daily routine and look at the big picture, have an international speaker and thinker such as yourself, and have a privilege of, direct interaction instead of the modern means of communication, which are wonderful, but nothing replaces this, being together in the room. I'm here to express my sincere hope that this is not your last visit to Georgia. Moreover, I would like your visits to our motherland not to be an occasion, but a tradition. Our door and our home is always open to you, your beautiful wife, and your children. And you have many friends in Tbilisi and in Georgia. And I ask everyone's support in thanking you for doing so much for us out of your wonderful heart, despite your current flu and illness. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
So let's just mingle.